stop eating that kale salad for just 1 second. Did you know the science behind your favorite plant-based influencer is built on a house of cards? Today, I'm shattering the consensus by exposing 7 intellectual fallacies they use to encourage you to ignore evolutionary biology, set up misconceptions in your mind, and ultimately trade your long-term metabolic health to serve their ideological propaganda. You've been told that plants are the pinnacle of health, but today I'm dismantling that cherry-picked data and the circular reasoning used to hide the unavoidable nutrient deficiencies on a vegan diet. It's time to stop prioritizing badly conceived ideology over actual physiological reality, biological requirements, health, and longevity. Let's go, number 1. All the societies that eat the most plants live the longest. Blue zones, though. Okay. Most of the blue zones have absolutely no verifiable, decent records kept by any kind of authority that we can trust whatsoever as to the birth date or death date of anybody in those zones. They were put together by a bloke called Dan Buettner, who had a theology to push and an idea to push and a story to sell. Dan was not a scientist. He didn't do any science. Blue zones aren't a thing. They're a lazy intellectual construct accepted by people who are intellectually lazy. Secondly, none of these populations are 100% vegan. So to apply it to that context, no good. It's enough, really. I mean, every single time I hear someone say blue zones, though, I've got to the point where I just don't even want to hear it anymore. Isn't that right, Pete?
2 additional populations would be, first of all, we can compare the Tarahumara to the Pima.
Yep.
In northern Mexico by Copper Canyon, Sierra Madre Mountain, the Tarahumara have kept their old-fashioned way, eating lots of corn and beans, local greens, some squash, and they're very healthy. They're famous for running 100 miles in 2 days. Tarahumara and having similar blood pressures in their teens as they do when they're older. And in comparison, there, of course, is the Pima population, which were absorbed into Arizona after the Mexican-American War of 1848. And they do eat a standard American diet, and they have tremendous obesity and everything that goes with that, hypertension, coronary artery disease, et cetera.
Right. So the fact that they became involved with the Western society and started to eat the Western diet would also suggest, Peter, that they became exposed to the Western lifestyle and ideology, and therefore that there were covariates, confounds, collinearities that means that there is no way for you to make any comment whatsoever on cause and effect when you're comparing those 2 populations in any way, shape, or form.
I can certainly say the Tarahumara, by sticking to their old ways, they have incredible endurance, and Nathan Pritikin patterned his diet after them. And another similar example would be looking at the Yanomamo. The Yanomamo is a population of persons sort of in the Amazon jungle near the borders of Brazil and Venezuela. And they also eat a primarily plant-based diet, and they're known to have,
You've sat with them and you know that for a fact, do you, Peter? Or is that just what you've read?
I just know from the papers
right,
I've read
so you
about.
haven't actually seen what they eat at all, because you're probably going to turn around at some point and tell me that Okinawans live on primarily rice and sweet potatoes.
They used to eat a lot.
Which they don't.
Used to eat a lot more sweet potatoes. There was
in fact, Peter, what they used to eat a lot of and still do is pork. And I think you'll find that that's nothing whatever to do with plants. Okay, so that's just a preempt if you're going to start going blue zones and what the facts are about what people do and don't eat. All right, so yeah, that's the blue zones taken care of. They're not a thing. All right. You're just a science denier. They'll throw you that one probably next. Dear idea. No, what we're doing is insisting upon science. There isn't any behind blue zones. Okay? Number 2.
This equation models the relationship between multiple independent variables.
The preponderance of evidence supports the vegan diet. Oh, preponderance of evidence. Fantastic. Well, that's me put in my place then. Cite it. Oh, just everything. Cite it. this preponderance of evidence. Oh, everybody knows the consensus position is up. Saying preponderance of evidence to support an argument is one of the most intellectually lazy misconceptions that you can put forward to somebody. You see, consensus is the domain, the area of sociology and not of empirical, evidential, scientific epistemology, a way of knowing things in science. It's a disciplined process. There are rules. Rules require that if you're going to talk about evidence, that you have some, and evidence is not extant, does not exist, if it is in the form of an opinion statement, and rather not in the form of an experimental piece of science undertaken under control and discipline, because that's the required standard for making cause and effect statements. So if you're going to say the vegan diet is good for you, that's a cause and effect statement. Ah, the preponderance of evidence supports me in that claim. Cite it. No? Okay, good, we're done. Let's move on swiftly, though, to number 3. Animals have rights, though. You are exploiting and mistreating animals by eating them. Okay. A lot of people don't know this, but just on 2 years ago, Pim and I decided to buy a farm, a small ranch, if you like. Buy a farm, they said. It'll be awesome. Oh my, have we learned a lot in 2 years, and there's much more to learn yet. Welcome to my home. My home is not just a home for people, it's also a farm, which is home to a largish number of animals. Dreadfully mistreated animals. I'm joking, they're not. Dreadfully exploited animals, well, that's a moral supposition, which we'll talk about a bit during this video, I'm sure. Let's go and visit some of these badly exploited, mistreated animals and see what their opinions are. Hello, boys. Chop chop. Hello, boys. Hello, boys. Come and say hello. Chop chop. Hey, come and say hello. Come on. Yes, look how terrified of me these animals are. Come on then. Come and say hello. You're my favourite. Yes, you are. Hey, let's have a pat. Hey, shall we? Come on in. You're my new favourite. Hey? Yes. Hello. Hey? Oh, yes. Oh, you're putting weight on well, aren't you? And you? Don't know about you. Hey? Yes. Hey? Oh, yes, you're my new favourite. Don't chew on me. Yes, you're going to get chewed on yourself at some point. That's just the way of it, isn't it? That's just the order of things. Hey? How do I feel about that? To be honest, I actually struggle with it. And I think if I didn't struggle with it, if I didn't have some kind of feelings about the lot of these animals, that would be pretty inhuman of me. And one of the things that does make us human is that we are able to empathise. That doesn't mean that the natural order of things isn't the right and just way of things, does it? You're trying to teach me a lesson by chewing on my top, aren't you? Well, fair enough too. Anyway, there it is. Welcome to another part of Pimbatia Farm. Our home, and also the home for a number of exploited animals. Well, here's the moral dilemma, really. Is it wrong to exploit animals? Well, exploitation and mistreatment are not synonymous. They're not the same thing. While these guys are absolutely exploited, currently they are gestating the next generation of animals also to be exploited by us for both food and for financial gain. Which makes us terrible people, obviously. Doesn't it, ladies? What do you think? Obviously terrified of us because of all the mistreatment that they don't receive. Isn't that right? Hey? Thing is, most of you watching this video will have jobs. Won't you? Are you being exploited at all by your employers? And is that the same thing as mistreatment? Sure, your employers won't kill you when you've done your job, perhaps, usually. Sure, they won't eat you. However, the eating of animals is the natural order of things for human beings. Cows eventually end up as food, don't they? Sorry about that. How do I feel about it? I struggle with it. I love these guys. Right, so what was Farmer Bart saying there? He was saying that exploitation and abuse/mistreatment, not the same things at all. Yes, we're exploiting animals. No, we're not abusing or mistreating them. It's not necessary to do so. Okay, do animals have rights in law? No. There are still laws against the mistreatment of animals and the abuse of animals, and I'll support those laws entirely. However, no, animals don't have rights. Okay, number 4. Dun, dun, dun. The environment, though. That's the next argument you'll get given. Okay, well, first of all, preponderance of evidence fits into this argument as well. So no, there are no experimental studies done on the environment of planet Earth in terms of the kind of problem that they're telling us exists with farming, one involving gas. Well, let's see if there's anything that happens on Pimbatia Farm which may have an impact in some way on gas. Welcome to yet another part of our home Pimbatia Farm, which is also the site of disgraceful environmental destruction and exploitation of natural resources of the worst possible kind. Obviously, that's why we have installed, at no small personal expense, these panels up here, which are 16 kilowatts maximum capacity, and they provide to us and also to the power grid, the national power grid, tens of megawatts per year of electricity. We're terrible people, aren't we? Excellent. Good. Well, that seems fair enough to me. I'm convinced. I trust that guy. He sounds quite trustworthy, that farmer. Right. Yeah. Anyone that wants to say preponderance of evidence about the environment and the science supports me about the environment as it regards to the activities of farming, beef specifically, and lamb, goats, poultry. Okay. Would monocropping be bad if I was doing that instead here with this piece of land? Would it be worse? Probably would in many ways. Certainly in my opinion. Anyways, there we go. The environment, though. No. Okay. Notice so far there hasn't been a single scientific argument, just one's purporting to be, or purporting to be supported by science, which really aren't. Now let's go through some actual scientific arguments that are put forward for the next 3 misconceptions that vegans will throw at you. Okay, are you ready? Number 5. Cholesterol, though. Ah, yes, of course. We all know that cholesterol causes heart disease, don't we? Except we don't. Preponderance of evidence, though. Sorry. No, there are no experiments that support the claim. None at all. The implications made Well, let's put it this way. The most commonly cited research paper that vegans will throw at you that absolutely proves their point about cholesterol, though, is the European Consensus Panel on Cardiovascular Disease, or something similar to that they call themselves. They're actually a group of independent scientists who work at various universities and stuff around the place, and who also, it seems, do quite a bit for financial consideration in return of large companies that make drugs to reduce cholesterol in the blood or something. Here's the list. My word. All right, are we done with that? There's no evidence for that claim. The inference is poor, in my scientific opinion, and it's an area that I have worked in and published in, cardiovascular pathophysiology, so I do know something about it. You can watch many videos on my channel, such as these ones here, really, which cover that. But in the meantime, I think we're done with cholesterol, though. Let's go to number 6. Bum, bum, bum. Red meat will cause cancer, though. The WHO have stated that red meat and processed meat are a class 2A carcinogen, though. Well, that statement is true. But what does that mean? Because, again, we're going to need some proof, because there's a cause and effect statement there. And the proof still would need to come in the form of a disciplined experimental intervention with human beings as subjects, seeing who we can give cancer to by feeding them red meat and controlling everything else throughout a lifespan. And I think you'll find that ethics committees are a little bit dead set against such ideas. So, we use the best data that we've got, Yeah, fine. I'm not adverse to doing that. That's okay with me, absolutely. So long as the conclusions you draw from it are that there is some data associating this and that, because that's the supportable claim, not the claim that therefore there is a cause between X and Y, because that's not been established. It's been inferred, but not established, and it's a poor inference. Right, there's that one. TMAO is something that's spoken about quite a bit. Turns out that's, you can watch a video on that here. Turns out that's no good either. Okay, NEU 5GC, that's something that's spoken about. If there was a meaningful cause and effect relationship between NEU 5GC and any kind of problem, then it would show up in incidence data, and it really doesn't. So it doesn't really need investigating much further. It's a theoretical problem which doesn't seem to pan out in reality. So me and my science, I know, insisting upon it and stuff. All right, so red meat and cancer though, nah. So let's go to our final misconception, and it's one that seems to be relatively recent in terms of it being proffered up by some of those people that have the vegan ideology for some reason. Recently I spoke about this, well recently, it was some time ago now, I spoke with vegan MD Peter Rogers about this. Let's see what he had to say. What is the dangerous factor?
Well, there's a couple different ways to look at diabetes. The concept of overnutrition. If you overwhelm the mitochondria, the inner mitochondrial membrane, electron transport, you can get that mitochondria to fail. What's happening is it's overwhelmed with electron carriers. It pumps protons too quickly into the intermembranous space between the outer and the inner mitochondrial membrane, and that causes a back pressure, if you will, that gradient, such that electron transport reverses direction on the inner mitochondrial membrane. When you have a chronically elevated blood glucose, hyperglycemia, your endothelial cells will take in too much glucose, and that elevated glucose within the cell will also cause this phenomenon of overnutrition. What we're referring to here is that it sends a signal to the enzymes in the cytoplasm to not allow any more glucose into the cell. And so if you're talking about skeletal muscle, you'll inhibit the glucose type 4 transporters from releasing their glucose transporters up to the plasma membrane. Normally you have them stored in cytoplasm vesicles. They merge with the plasma membrane, let's say in a skeletal muscle, and then the glucose type 4 transporters allow the glucose into the cell. And so you get damage to the endothelium in the setting of hyperglycemia. And that, like I said, that's the universal term sometimes referred for this purpose is overnutrition.
Okay. So you seem to be alluding there, Peter, without actually necessarily explicitly saying that type 2 diabetes is chronically elevated blood glucose and nothing else. That's what it is. That is how it is diagnosed. That is the pathology, elevated blood glucose, and it's that needs to be ameliorated. Yes?
Well, kind of, but not exactly, because there's different ways to look at it. One can consider the elevated blood glucose. Yes, you are absolutely correct. It is how one diagnoses the disease. It is how it is officially defined. It is how it is staged and mapped. That is all true. But there's also the case of something that comes before the hyperglycemia, and that's the insulin resistance that I just referred to, sometimes also called overnutrition.
Right. Okay. So that's what you mean by overnutrition. You mean insulin resistance. Okay. How would you respond, Peter, if I proposed to you that insulin resistance is a construct? We're talking about the antagonistic effects of fat entering a mitochondria versus carbohydrate entering a mitochondria, or attempting to do so, at ostensibly the same or similar points around the acetyl coenzyme A entry point, yeah? I.e., the Randle cycle is in effect if you have a significant mix of both carbohydrates and fats trying to enter the mitochondria for oxidative process, yeah?
Well, I haven't reviewed the Randle cycle in a while, so I'm not familiar with it. Just,
ostensibly, you have outlined accurately the net effects of carbohydrate and fat both trying to enter the mitochondria at the same time. That being the blockade of the GLUT4 transporter, thus disallowing the entry of blood glucose to the cell according to its concentration gradient in most cells like skeletal muscles. So you got that absolutely bang on. Here's my question for you, though. Insulin resistance, which is a construct used to describe that deactivation of the GLUT4 transporter, is universally imagined to be described as a pathology in need of fixing. It isn't. It exists because of at least 3.8 billion years of positive and negative selection pressures in our metabolic pathways. It exists precisely to protect muscle cells from the damage they would incur were glucose allowed to enter according to its concentration gradient without any control. This is a lock the door from the inside mechanism. Thus, the sacrificial lambs become the epithelial cells of the vascular tree and the formed elements in the tissue of the blood. Example, the red blood cells as being the ones that are most affected, as measured by an HbA1c test. So again, Peter, let me ask you again. Type 1 diabetes, which is diagnosed as chronically elevated blood glucose, it is the elevated blood glucose that is the pathology. It is the elevated blood glucose that causes the damage to the epithelial cells, nothing to do with fat whatsoever. And as such, the way to ameliorate type 2 diabetes is stop pouring carbohydrates down your neck. Right, so ostensibly we're talking about lipotoxicity there, which is the claim, according to Peter Rogers, that if you consume a lot of fat, then your ability to absorb and metabolize carbohydrates will be compromised. And Peter Rogers is exactly correct. Yes, that is what happens. Where Peter Rogers gets it wrong is that he then goes on to imply that therefore is a problem. It's the begging the question fallacy, which assumes that we ought to be able to consume any amount of carbohydrate carte blanche without there being any kind of ramification of so doing. And that it's normal to be able to consume any amount of carbohydrates and abnormal if the body says no thanks at any given point. Well, that's what the body's doing. At a point where the body's had enough carbohydrate, thanks, it closes the doors of the cells on the inside so that those cells can't absorb any more glucose, which would be damaging at a concentration which is too high. It's a normal, natural part of the genes providing the answers for survival techniques. Your genes and mine, believe it or not, are the peak of evolution, which has been going on for, seems like, at least 3,800 million years. And those genes really know what they're doing. They have good reasons for doing all the things they do. And those genes have set out for a bunch of metabolic machinery, for want of a better term, which does a certain role, including locking the doors from the inside of cells when there's enough sugar there, thanks. Having plenty of energy in the form of fat means that the amount of sugar that's needed is less. So why wouldn't it lock it out sooner? Because it would be damaging if it didn't. It's normal function. It's not a pathology. It's not a disease. It's not the cause of a disease. Type 2 diabetes is the elevation in blood sugar. That's how it's measured, diagnosed. That's the thing that they're treating when they attempt to treat it. It's not because of insulin resistance, which they're saying is the etiology, the underpinning cause. No, the insulin resistance is a construct, and it's a thing that exists because of the activities of the Randle Cycle, which you can watch many videos about on a playlist, or over there. All right, so at the end of the day, the 7 most common misconceptions put forward by vegans as reasons why you should be vegan don't hold any water. That's what this scientist says. Join me next time. In the meantime, watch this. Hey, little dude. This is another one of our vastly mistreated and exploited animals here in Pimbatia. He has a poorly leg or foot and has been unable to walk, and as such, or put much weight on it. As such, he gets to be most favoured over all poultry on site and live inside like a king, if you please. Don't you, mister? Dear oh dear. What do you think, Snoozy? What do you think about this whole procedure?